Well, hi and welcome to this video on maximising your profits. I've been joined by Mark Underwood, who's a business advisor from CMU Partners, and we're really going to go through all the different facets of a business. It's just over an hour long, and we're going to look at obviously KPIs, so your key performance indicators in your business, and then breaking that down into separate sections in terms of sales, gross profit, costs, etc. We're going to spend a little bit of time on each one of those sections so that you can actually see where the areas might be, to give you a flavour and some ideas that maybe you haven't thought about, or if you have thought about exactly what senior people are looking at in their business when they're trying to maximise out their profits. A lot of it's to do with focus. That's why we're starting off with KPIs, so that your focus is around the drivers in your business. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, please subscribe to my channel below, and also switch on the bells for notifications. We're putting 1 or 2 videos up every week, so I hope you enjoy it, and thanks for watching.
On my screen, we'll go straight into the presentation. So as you know, this is about maximising profits and performance matters. So that's myself and Mark Underwood. Though some of you know me on here, most of you know me by now. So I'm obviously the managing director of Joseph Creative Business, but I'm also co-owner of Rosedale Estate Agents and Rosedale Letting Agents, and I've also got an involvement in a martial arts business. Those businesses independently turn over £1 million each, with the exception of the martial arts business. And my prior life, I was CEO of a clothing company for, I don't know, too many years to mention. But that had global operations, and we were employing about 150 staff at one point. So got a little bit of experience in business. Over to you, Mark. Don't know if you want to give the guys a rundown of your experience.
Sure. So I'm Mark Underwood from CMU Partners. I'm essentially a business advisor. My background is within manufacturing and distribution, mainly in the medical device sector. I've worked for global businesses at MD and CEO level, managing 16 different countries. So for more years than I care to mention on this call.
You're still looking good though, Mark. Still looking good.
Thank you, John.
It's always a hair situation. So you're not dealing with a problem that obviously I'm dealing with, which I just keep sweeping my hair back. Let's see how long we can get away with that for.
Yeah.
So this is what we're going to be looking at today, folks. KPIs, briefly on sales, because we talked about that a lot last week, but picking up just some slightly different areas: purchasing costs, Q&A, and then what the next webinars are. Feel free, guys, to throw in your comments into the chat. I really like that when we do that. So if you've got something that springs to your mind whilst we're doing something, just throw it into the chat, and I'll try and pick it up while we're in that section. If that makes sense. Okay, so KPIs. So what are KPIs? Well, for those of you who don't know, they're key performance indicators, and they allow businesses to really focus on what's important in the business. And all businesses should have their own separate KPIs that really mirror and focus on the drivers of the business. So essentially, it's all right having a set of financial accounts, but actually KPIs are really where some businesses start. So I'm going to show you a quick example of that. All right, sharing screen into a couple of. Sorry, I'll just stop for a second. Just admit another person. Okay. This is a couple of examples of what KPIs might look like. Everyone see those okay? Just thumbs up's fine. Yeah. Okay, so I've just on Fred Blogs and another estate agent. So we can see there are different sets of KPIs, but they're both pertinent in their own ways. And so when you're looking at a set of financials, yes, you'll see your turnover. Yes, you might see your gross profit, and yes, you might see your net profit. And of course, they're really important figures. But actually, what got you to that point? That's the thing. And the KPIs, if you do these correctly, these are what's going to be driving you to getting those financials. Certainly, I can send this over if anyone wants a copy of this. This is just a mock-up of what a KPI can look like. But if you look at the other estate agent, and this is the purpose of KPIs. When estate agents make an invoice, so you can see here I've got sales here of 57,000. That actual invoice won't happen until July. Yeah, so all these numbers in April will not happen in an estate agents until July. So if we're not monitoring our KPIs live in the month, we're 3 months behind. So looking at a set of financials in an estate agents, we can't invoice till we exchange, and that might take 3 months to do that. So if we're not monitoring our KPIs live in the month, we actually monitor them by branch, by day. But a minimum businesses should be doing is really looking at them on a monthly basis. So how many valuations did we get? Well, that's what drives an estate agency. How many vals do we go out? How many properties do we value? From that, how many people decided that they chose us? And most people will get 3 estate agents out. So if you can get close to 50%, you're doing okay. You're not brilliant, but you're doing okay, because there's 3 people normally going out, which means if you get a third, you're getting a fair share. But as a business that's trying to be dynamic, you want to be getting a lion's share of that market. And so monitoring your conversion rate, if you've got a number of people doing valuations, why are they getting different outcomes? Because that's the first driver point in this business. Because without the instruction, without the valuation and then the instruction, your business is then up against it. How many sales do we get? Well, typically, again, in estate agents, you might sell 50 to 60% of your stock. You can't sell all your stock because then you've got no business. And typically that won't happen. So you're measuring against how much we're selling. And then you're creating a value from those sales. What's the value of those sales? And that creates an average fee. So, and inside of this, how many fallouts do we have? So inside of an estate agent, they're the really important numbers in an estate agent. I don't need to, once you're focusing on them, your business will hit certain figures if you make those go up. You see what I mean? Whereas if you look at your financials, in July, we reported that number here might be down to 50,000 because we had a further dropout in sales in this period. Yeah, because that can't really go up unless you force immediate cash sales out or something like that. So this is why there's no point looking here. This is too late. We need to be looking here. So in most businesses, however, this month and the sales month and the invoicing month will align. So you know, doing whatever. And if we look at a normal type business, maybe this type of business, how many inquiries are we getting in the month? Are they going up and down? This is quite an interesting one, just looking at March and April. So if we can see, and we're just going to gross profit now. The gross profit is important because if your costs are staying firm, what contribution to those costs are important. So even in a month where we turned over 27,000, it was 1,000 less than the month before, we pumped in more gross profit. So our turnover was down, our new accounts were down, our inquiries are down, but we pumped in more gross profit because we had a higher average order value. So,
sorry to interrupt. Would you basically? I'm in the business of pet food, so obviously you've got initial order, then you've got a certain amount of account management and things like that. And I've got a number of reps that basically I target at the moment on new accounts and then go back into like account management. But it's not, the accounts aren't big enough to have separate account managers and separate just sole new business. So would that, when I'm going through it, at the moment I KPI on one whole, a number of orders and everything like that, would you say it would be an advantage to have KPIs on account management sales as well as new business and then marry them up?
Well, I mean, KPIs can be used, the size of your business, you can drive KPIs into different elements of it. Maybe Mark can talk a little bit about how I might have done it in different sectors as well, but you can have it in different areas. So for us, we'll do a daily KPI, Dan, on a daily one on every business. So we can see immediately, we're seeing things quicker. So smaller businesses don't need to see it quite so quickly, and things aren't changing from day to day, and that's really why. But when your business is changing quite a lot on the day basis, you break it down by day, and you can even create KPIs around individuals.
What I've always been so conscious of is death by KPIs, where they're kind of focusing on different areas and they're not really using initiative in the respect of, if I give them one target, then they can kind of outsource where they go to. But
yeah, when you break it down to individual people, you may choose what the drivers are for those individual people. So if we got a valuer going out on business, then clearly we're focusing on them, how many valuations can they get and how many instructions and what's that conversion rate. They don't need to know this. This is not important. The average fee they need to know. Okay, so that they may only have a few drivers. You definitely don't want too many messages. And I always say on KPIs, a maximum of 6 drivers. Mark, what about yourself? What would you say on that?
I would agree with you there. Six key drivers, and it's perfectly normal to have different KPIs for different areas of a business, and obviously they've got to be suitable for your business. So for the example you gave, Dan, it might be that if you're running a sales team, focusing on the number of trading accounts that they have, and so that you're encouraging to build their account base. But I would also say, as well as looking at the turnover of those accounts, where you've got more of a commodity type product that might vary quite a lot in essentially what you're selling it for, putting a KPI around the gross profit that those accounts have generated.
Okay. Yeah. Quite fortunate in the respect that dogs eat the same amount. So obviously, an account you can forecast really quite easily. Apart from obviously COVID, and then everyone orders 10 months supply, and it's absolutely crazy. But that's really helped. Thank you.
One thing that Dan, when you've got account management and new business, what new business does usually is it measures how proactive salespeople are in driving the business forward. Because what can happen with account management, because don't forget, you can set a budget for accounts. We want these separate accounts to do X, Y, and Z. So you can set budgets for them and their targets. But actually, you can be plodding along and achieve those targets. But actually, winning new business is a driver. And it's a good focus to make sure that your people are hungry to get new business. I've always found that good people, are getting results in both areas. So that's just giving you an idea of how different KPIs and how your business adapt different KPIs, but don't just have them for the sake of them. Make sure that they are actual drivers and they really are important aspects of what you're doing. So let's go back to the presentation. And that's KPIs. I didn't want to spend too much time on that, but if anyone wants more information on those, we're happy to go through it. Certainly, any of these things we're going through, if you want any more information, you want to give me and Mark more ideas about expanding on any of these situations, where it's managing sales teams or whatever, drop it in the notes and we'll bring it back. So sales. So we did go through sales and marketing last time, and I love sales and marketing because I think, when you're pushing your sales forward, in typical businesses, it's the right thing to do. It's going to get more profitability. But one thing Mark will talk to you about is being careful about that. So this is what we're going to look at between myself and Mark now, expanding markets and pricing, conversion rates, rewarding performance, minimum term contracts, and CRM. So I'll probably kick this off with expand your markets. What does that mean? So last week I talked about I was going to go into New York. So I've done 2 little forays into New York virtually, and I've already pulled out 4 inquiries, 2 of which are ongoing, and that was just from saying I was going to do it last week. So if you've got a physical or a virtual product, how can you expand your market geographically? And I think that's I've just demonstrated how easy. I'm not doing business yet; it takes time, but it is quite easy in this current situation to expand your market. So think out of the box in terms of your normal market. And so we're going to go through, we did so much on sales last week. I don't want to spend too much time in that area. Mark, do you want to talk about pricing incrementally, Mark, in terms of how pricing can affect profitability?
Yeah, sure. So as part of a sales strategy where you're looking at trying to improve gross margin, obviously one of the simplest ways of doing that is by increasing price. But a lot of small businesses are very uncomfortable about increasing price because they immediately think, well, that will lose me sales. Where actually there's several different ways that you can test that. Firstly, I would always say understand your market and understand the value of whatever you're selling. So doing competitive analysis so that you can intelligently increase price with good market knowledge and intelligence. And one of the simplest ways to test it is by doing it in small increments, testing it in individual territories. So if you've got, you're uncomfortable about maybe doing it across all accounts, take an individual area and increase the price in that area. Always bear in mind that any little increases that you can make in the area of pricing, that additional revenue does fall through to your bottom line, presuming you're already a profitable business, and can make dramatic changes to your overall performance.
A lot of new businesses will actually use new customers to do that. Okay, so they'll test a price change on a new customer. Obviously, a lot of people discount new customers heavily. You see that in the consumer world a lot. But actually, you can use that to test a pricing offer into a new area. So I'm going in the United States. I'm going to New York City. Do I charge the same as I was charged locally? Do I charge the same as I was charged in London? Do I charge the same as I was charged for anywhere else in the world? So you can choose to measure that and get those prices without risking your entire database of pricing. But I think what you're saying there, Mark, is that for every pound you put onto turnover, the majority of that pound will fall straight to the profit line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Conversion rates, Mark, as well. I mean, I know you're a master at this.
Yeah, so conversion rates are really important, because a lot of the cost of sales is taken up in, finding business, introducing your business to new customers. All that cost within the organization has to be absorbed, whether you win business or don't win business, especially if you've got a lot of sales staff. A lot of the time, a lot of their costs can be quite fixed. So focusing on what conversion rate you're getting is really important. And this really links in with pricing as well, is that if you've got a really robust sales process and you're following up every sales opportunity, you should be able to, one, monitor your conversion rates really accurately and understand why you both win and lose business. And that, again, gives you good market intelligence as to whether your pricing is right. Because if your conversion rates dramatically drop because you've increased pricing, well, then that's it, market intelligence in itself. So getting your sales team to focus on, well, what are our conversion rates, and understanding it is a really important element to making sure the overall profitability of the business is good.
Yeah, I think that's quite important. And obviously looking at what is happening in conversions. So if you're going into different markets, you might start to find that you're converting better in other markets. And so it means you can start to focus your business attention through maybe other people as well into different markets. So you understand you're doing well, so you keep pushing in those markets, particularly at the moment, because of the way the economy is locked down in certain sectors. That's really, really important. The whole economy is not working in the same way. And as I said last week, there's going to be elements of this economy is going to be absolutely booming in the next 6 to 9 months, and other elements are going to be falling and are not going to recover for years. So if you want to be on the back of the ones that are going to be booming, because that's going to help your business naturally. If you're going against the tide, it's much more difficult.
I think the other point with conversions is understand, if you've got a team of people, obviously understanding individual conversion rates, but also understanding the conversion rates of different product offerings. A lot of businesses might understand their overall conversion rates, but can they drill that down into the individual offerings? So if you took a marketing company like yours, Joseph, what's your conversion rate on things like websites versus LinkedIn campaigns? Understanding that kind of level of data to understand whether your offering in every area of your business is solid.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, reward performance makes sense, but in a sales area, what you're effectively trying to do is make sure that if someone is doing well for you, that you're rewarding them in relation to what they're doing. And I don't think anyone on this call would have any issues with making sure that people are rewarded. The big thing is measuring the employee actually delivered that performance, and it didn't just come with the territory. So I think that's probably big for all of us. Minimum term contracts is one. Got to be really, really careful with this one, but it is a very, very significant factor with a lot of companies. So if you've given people the ability just to come out of your services at no notice, that means that you're obviously, one, your business may be actually valued less if you ever came to value. If you've got no contracts, your business would have less value because you can't guarantee its revenue streams. But two, in actual fact, people can jump away from you quite quickly, and therefore the effects of things can be much quicker on your business. So you see this typically in leisure businesses, gyms, stuff like that. So they will have a degree of protection in their contracts just so that they don't have immediate drop-offs in their turnover. It's called the attrition rate. Gyms have very high attrition rates, perhaps 50% plus attrition rates. So they'll have contracts in play that keep them going. Very, very big difference in profitability. You could be looking at a 2, 3, 4 times overall net profit difference because of contracts. So they can work for you and against you, but consider them anyway. Use a CRM. Well, next week, guys, I'm doing a CRM made simple exercise. So I'll go into that in more detail. Essential that you do use one. So moving on to purchases. This, with Mark's background, this is really Mark's key area. I don't know, Mark, if you want to just go on to straight into that review and price of goods. I mean, it seems obvious, but a bit of background to that, Mark, would be good for people.
Okay, sure. So one of the key things is if you're in manufacturing or distribution, obviously what you're actually purchasing the raw materials or goods at before you sell them on is a fundamental part of your overall profitability. And putting a robust process around that within the business is really important, so that, you know, in a big manufacturing business, for instance, you might have a first tier and second tier supplier. You've got robust processes around how you are reviewing prices of all goods, and that is tracked over a period of time, so that you can demonstrate to your suppliers that you understand the overall cost of the goods that you're buying from them. And in manufacturing, that's really imperative, because when you're working on very small margins, the cost of your raw materials coming in can be the difference between you making a gross profit or not making a gross profit.
Okay. Now you talk about first tier, and we talk about first tier and second tier suppliers. What's the importance of why you might do that?
Well, having your suppliers in line, so that if one of those is struggling to supply you, that you've automatically got a second tier of suppliers that can step up and fulfill your needs and keep your production line moving. A lot of big companies now will not put 100% of their supply chain with one supplier on one item. So for instance, I've got an electronics company that I'm working with at the moment. They buy a lot of PCB boards. We've done quite a big piece of work in making sure that they've actually got 3 options with those boards, because it's essential for them, as part of what they're producing, that the supply chain of those parts keeps going. Now, if one of those businesses is particularly heavy, especially during a period like this, that can have an immediate effect on your business. So having tiers of suppliers lined up, and it also just keeps pricing on its toes, and it allows you that space to go and explore the different price points with different suppliers, their capabilities, their service, and holds your own supply chain really nice and tight.
It's interesting that supermarkets do this a lot. So they'll have a first tier supplier based on products, sometimes categories, but even on products, where they take a product in at first tier, which means the first tier supplier will get 60% market share of the product, perhaps UK wide. Second and third tier suppliers get the rest. But of course, that means the second tier supplier is always wanting to get into the first tier position. So pricing is naturally kept kept at a competitive rate. So again, it might not seem naturally that this is to do with profitability, but it really, really is. So we've got here drilled down to individual product service offerings. I think you talked a little bit about that. What about review suppliers? What do we talk about when we're talking about reviewing our suppliers?
I think again, you know, if you are whatever business you're in, you'll have a range of different suppliers that are providing products and services to your business, and having an ongoing process around how you keep those under review, look at what else is being offered to your business and in the wider market. So that your business doesn't fall into the trap of just consistently buying from the same people at a bad rate or with a poor service. And this isn't all just about price either. You know, a lot of it can be about the service offering. How quickly are they supplying you? Is it always on time? You know, are your suppliers doing what they're meant to be doing, or are they causing your internal team a lot of work because they're constantly being chased? And that obviously then has an impact on your capacity, your cost, your profitability.
So it sort of leads into, doesn't it? I know it's not quite in line here, but it does lead into this service level agreement where you have suppliers that have agreed to service you to a certain level. And obviously, it's moving a little bit away from price, but it is ensuring that you have, if you've got products, that you are getting products delivered on time in agreement with what you need.
Finish at 12.
Would you agree? Sorry, we just had an interruption there, but
yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So we're building in sort of in the supply when we're reviewing a supplier. If we've got a service level agreement, we've actually got a lot more information about the supplier's performance as well, haven't we?
Absolutely. I mean, service level agreements in manufacturing can be imperative just to make sure that you're consistently getting the same product at the same price to a level of quality. And unless those things are tied down in agreement, then you've got no level of recourse if the supplier seriously lets you down. And I mean, an important point around that for your own profitability is that if you have to go and do a service recall on a product because somebody hasn't supplied you with the correct standard, but you haven't got that written down anywhere, you haven't got that covered off, then that cost is going to sit with you. You're not going to have any recourse against the supplier.
Yeah.
So service level agreements are really important. Yeah,
because they can have obviously penalty clauses in play, which you know are there for the benefit of the customer, but also to make sure that the supplier has agreed to it and is operating in the way that they agreed to. Sometimes they can be quite punitive, these penalties, so companies have to be very careful what they're signing up to. But sometimes it might be that if you deal with some of these home shopping channels, for example, they will say to you, okay, when can you provide the product? And you go, I can provide it on September the 1st. Fine, okay, so on September the 1st we expect the delivery. You know, it's not that they want it quicker, they just want it when you say you're going to deliver it, which is essentially because that's when they're going to build all their marketing around selling your product for, that you need. So sometimes it's not all, so generally you want to make sure they're reasonable to both parties.
Yeah. I just saw a message pop up from Dan actually, which is a really relevant point. Is it possible to review costs and SLAs within a contract term? I think that's the type of thing, Dan, that you normally build. If it's a longer term service level agreement, it's the type of thing that you would build into the agreement when you are going to review prices. So I've overseen service level agreements that have gone on for 5 years, but you put in those annual reviews and some of the parameters of what's going to justify a price increase.
So like currency, you could put currency in there as a.
It could be currency. If your product contains one core element. So for instance, in a wiring company, if you're using a lot of copper, you could say, well, the price of copper influences our price. Whatever you want to pick out, really, that will safeguard your position.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've got in here, always ask for the best price. It's actually quite an interesting one, that. I know Mark and I talked about this yesterday. So I used to have a team that would look after our goods, our resale of goods. So when we're talking about selling products, we talk about goods, and you'd have a high level team that look after goods, including directors of businesses will look after the big spend. So if you've got a multi-million-pound business, you've got to have a big spend on goods, because that's what you're buying and selling in the main. But actually, you're also acquiring a lot of other services down the line that relate to your costs. And it's really important, and you can just use this in everyday life. But the first thing is ask the price. Now, businesses can get into a habit of just ordering stuff and not asking for the price of an individual, because what they'll then do straight away is go to their standard price and just say, well, that's our price, £19.99, that's what it is. But actually, if you say, is that the best price you can do? Because I'm going to be looking around, you'll get a better price. In the main, you'll get a better price. And you imagine you repeat this over and over and over again in business, it makes a massive difference to what you buy. It doesn't work at your core level, your tier one supplier level, because you're agreeing things in advance with those. This is all the peripheral stuff where you just keep on asking for a better price. And I think you made a point, we talked yesterday, Mark, about asking for it. So you're going to make a decision quicker, like in today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting when you look at businesses' accounts, how much of their purchasing is done through, sort of agreements with first tier and second tier suppliers versus those suppliers that we just buy off as and when we need them. And very often our behavior changes with those. We need it urgently. So we just say, oh, yeah, can you just get me some of those quickly today? Without really getting into the detail of the price, monitoring the price. So yeah, absolutely. Asking what the best price is and doing a bit of searching around that is really important.
We did one yesterday for quite a big deal. Basically said, look, we want to make a decision on it today. Can you get your best price back to us today? So pressurizing the situation. But guess what? They get an order today. So thinking about it from the from the supplier's point of view, they want an order, and you're ready to give them. You'll give them an order today, but you just need to get the pricing in play. So sometimes when you think you've pushed it hard enough and there is nowhere to go, that means they've come back to you now and said, that's the best price we can do. You say, I'm going to give you more volume. I can do more business. Yeah, but we can't go any cheaper than that. Okay, well, can we agree some sort of rebate? So if I'm going to go from giving you £50,000 of business to £100,000 or £1 million to 2 million, I want to build in some rebate, because you're going to see a physical benefit from that. Whilst you can't see it right now, I understand that's where your pricing is. Agree some rebates. And one thing about rebates is suppliers forget about them. They forget they're giving you rebates. So what happens is they give you best pricing. So let's say they've got an offer on something and they're going to the market with it and they're going to offer it £1 a unit. They're offering it to everybody at £1 a unit. But you might have agreed a 5% rebate scheme, which this value of this order is going to go towards your scheme, which might be, you might have a triggered point where if you do £1 million of business with them, you get an extra 5%. They'll have forgotten about that. A lot of suppliers will have forgotten to set you up on these deals. They'll still give you the best price to give them to everybody in the market. And I would strongly advise people to think about rebates, especially when you're looking at suppliers. When Mark was talking about you reviewing suppliers, you might choose to consolidate a supply line, put it together, but get a rebate brought into the thing as well. So again, it's just more and more profit. These things come at 100% profit. They have no costs associated with them. So they drop straight down at the bottom line. And I've got reduced waste usage on here as well. That's a really critical one. I mean, in purchases, that's quite a tricky one. That might be if you're a clothing manufacturer, that might be about improving your yields. So we'll talk about that one perhaps more in the cost section. Anyone got any questions on purchases before we move on to costs? Let me just see. I think there's one in here. Okay, no, we've picked that up already. Okay, brilliant stuff. Okay, so we'll move on to costs. Okay, so Mark, I don't know if you want to cover some of this in terms of setting these budgets and why it's important on costs.
Sure, absolutely. So a lot of small businesses don't set very tight budgets or review budgets, and not just small businesses, a lot of businesses. So having a rolling 90-day budget where you're setting out what your costs should be for that period and then reviewing them with your team to understand whether you're on budget, below budget, how that's worked out is an important part to keeping your profit on track. Because if costs just slip by 3-4 points in lots of different areas of your business, some of your initial assumptions on what your gross profit should be can just be blown out of the water, and you can very quickly be making a loss. Remembering in a lot of, for instance, manufacturing businesses, some manufacturing businesses are working on between 15 and 20% gross margin. So it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see how you can very quickly slip into a position where you're making a loss. So that's about reviewing all those costs. So, fixed costs in a business, what are they? How often are they being reviewed? Are they being tracked to see whether there's any spikes that can be dealt with? Those variable costs, those purchases that are being made, every day by your team. What are the disciplines around that, and how are they being monitored? Are all disciplines that influence the profitability of a business. A big one that Joseph's put on the list here is obviously labour costs. Labour costs, especially in a manufacturing business, are a key element again to profitability and keeping those labour costs under review. And very often people think that when you start talking about labour costs, you're talking about maybe taking an axe to labour. And it's not about that at all. Actually, it's about looking at how you can get the greatest productivity out of the labour. And very often the easiest way to do that, if you're an operational guy, is just getting down to shop floor level and understanding where the pinch points are within the process, and what parts the team find tedious, time consuming, and how you can maybe adjust the process to get better productivity out of the labour. Therefore, improving the output, therefore improving the productivity and profitability of the business.
I think there's quite an interesting statistic on that you can look at across your peers, actually, which is how much value do you get out of every employee in your business against your turnover. So you've got 10 employees, you turn over £1 million, you're getting £100,000 of value out of each employee. How does that measure across your competitors? Because that's effectively how the productivity level can be measured. There's many ways to do it, but that is one of them. If your businesses are similar, you need to be getting maximum amount of productivity in value terms out of each individual. Because otherwise, obviously, that's creating cost, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great way of doing some market analysis and competitor analysis. I worked with a German company who were very, very into understanding every element of their own businesses and how they compared against their competitors. And what they would do is they would look at the revenue they were generating against their nearest competitor who had similar revenue, but they even broke it down by what type of people they were employing. So they would do a comparison of, right, how many directors have we got versus how many directors have they got? How many account managers have we got? How many account managers have they got? How many shop floor workers have they got? How many shop floor? And they did that across the whole business. And getting down to that level of detail can sound a little bit, like tedious, but it's not, and it helps you understand the reality of how you perform in an industry, not just as a business, but in an industry, and starts to give you some steer as to why you might not be as profitable as a competitor, or why you might be a lot more profitable than a competitor.
I mean, it's very interesting, that, isn't it? And I know some people, and it is difficult to sometimes find out some information, But at a higher level, some of the larger reporting requirements do require obviously turnover to be produced, and also employee numbers. So sometimes you can look at the larger organisation to see. Sometimes you think they're going to, because they're bigger, they're more cumbersome, and actually they're carrying more cost. But actually, sometimes you'll see that they're very, very good at extracting value. And what that means when you actually work that down to the bottom line is you can still see this measurement. So, for example, last week there's loads of PLCs out there in a state agency that you can go and measure what's their turnover, how many people they're employing. Just that statistic alone will tell you, are you benchmarking with them, or are you out in some way? And it will immediately give you a steer, actually. If you're underperforming on costs to a peer business that's reporting those numbers, you'll know, why would that be? Why would they be gaining more value than you are? Now, that might be in the estate agency world. Some of the big corporates actually own the entire mortgage book as well. They own the conveyancing as well. So an independent agent is using brokers for these areas, but the large companies own these areas. They own them, so they can bring the value of these things into their business. So it's a different thing. So yeah, they might be offering more. They might have more costs sometimes, but actually they might be getting more value. So just measuring against your peers is actually really good to understand. And obviously a bigger company can drive into their numbers. They can't drive into yours because it's very often you have to report them. But bigger companies do have to show them. I've got a big one down there that I'd like to jump on to, maybe just jump around a bit. Reducing usage. So really key. A lot of us can be really good at looking what price we're paying for something. So, we're paying £1 for that, or we're paying a penny for this, or whatever it happens to be. Printing, for example. In printing, you might go, I'm paying 1.5 pence a copy, or I'm paying 4 pence for colour. But do you consider, do you need to print? Do we need to be printing, creating all this print? How much of it are we doing? How much waste are we generating? So even small businesses can generate thousands of pounds worth of cost that actually don't need to generate. Is your business paperless? Joseph Create is an entirely paperless business. We don't create paper. At no point do we create paper into the business. What does that save us? Well, it saves money. Our estate agency is a similar situation. We're certainly moving towards being entirely paperless, because it costs thousands and thousands of pounds to print documents. So, and it costs a lot of money on wasted documents. How many properties, for example, let's say we take a property on and we produce 100 printed copies of that property to give out to people. And then we sell it after 3 days. We've only given out 3 copies, but printed 97 of them. That's 97 wasted copies. And that's paper, ink, and maintenance costs potentially, replicated through the entire company. It's huge. And you don't just one particular item. And so actually thinking about usage in your company is really, really, really important. And looking at, and you won't see that unless you take just by monitoring your costs and your accounts, because they won't stand out as an anomaly. So what we talked about earlier is when we're reviewing 90-day budgets and costs, we're looking at anomalies jumping out, aren't we, Mark? Where we're seeing an anomaly jump out. You won't see an anomaly if your habits are just never changing. So you do need to get deeper into the way your company operates to understand, why are we doing such a process, and can we make it more efficient with maybe technology, for example. And I think now is such a great time. What do you think, Mark, about now being such a time to look at this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the obvious one that will jump out at most businesses at the moment is that everybody's travel would have dropped through the floor. And I know a lot of sales managers that are thinking, actually, can I get my sales team doing more remotely and less travel? But essentially constantly improving and looking at your sales process, your internal process, to see where you can take out any kind of waste. If you're manufacturing or distributing a product, how much waste is there in that cycle? As an example of poor practice, I was working with an electronics business last year, and they weren't measuring their waste of cabling at all, and they were literally putting pallet loads of it out a week for recycling. Now, the good thing is they were recycling and getting some money back, but they weren't measuring it. They were just getting a check back off the guy that was recycling it. So understanding that, so that you can challenge it with people in the organisation, because when you're a business owner, I think you are quite eyes wide open to a lot of this stuff, but your employees might not be. You know, they might not understand that that extra piece of cable they've just chucked on the pile over there, because I don't want to try and rework that, actually has a value. You know, so getting them to think about usage is really important, and getting people to work smart is a great way of increasing the productivity, reducing wasted time and cost, and again, which automatically adds profitability back into the business.
So what about the final one on this cost, introducing change incentives? I mean, it's quite an interesting one. In my experience, the people that say they don't mind change and seem open to change are nearly always end up being the individuals who actually do not like change. And I suppose a lot of us don't like change because essentially we don't know what it means, therefore we've no experience of it and we've no knowledge of it. I talk about this a lot. If we don't have any experience of anything, we don't have any knowledge of anything, then change is going to be something we're very we might not seem opposed to it, and we might say all the right things, but actually because we have no experience or knowledge of it, we're going to be very fearful of it. So introducing change incentives, how does that work in the experience you've got, Mark?
So, you know, just picking up on the point you say about change with people, it's a fact that actually most people in their everyday lives, you know, they like change, they chase change, you know, whether that's, I'm going to try out this latest exercise, I'm going to try out this latest diet. They quite like variety. When you start introducing change into the workplace, it becomes a different thing, because that automatically feels like a threat to a lot of people, because that change might be them. Yeah. So introducing change that can save money in the business, again, people automatically think, well, how's that going to impact me? So introducing change incentives and putting incentives around change is a way of trying to put that a little bit on its head and saying, well, look, we can all benefit from this. And some good examples of that have been shown in, you know, big manufacturing plants. You know, a story I shared with Joseph yesterday, which was one of the best examples I've ever heard, was where somebody who worked on a shop floor line, I think it might have been in Nissan or one of the big car makers, said, you know, if we just take off that little printed part of the cigarette lighter button many years ago, when they used to have like the little picture of a cigarette on the button, it would save a fortune if you added that up across every car we make across the world. Where somebody actually took that idea came from somebody on a shop floor. Somebody went and took that idea, and it saved the organization millions, absolutely millions, and had no impact on the products, no impact on the customer, but was a simple example of how just simple ideas and initiatives like that can save a lot of money to a business. And putting some incentive around that, especially if you're producing a product or, you know, again, you're working on very tight margins, is a great way to get people engaged with change.
I think the people at the sharp end know how to do these jobs the best, and they know the problems that they're in. They know the little annoying things. It might be that something doesn't fit very easily when they move it from A to B, it doesn't quite fit properly or something like that. And it's all these milliseconds. We used to be in the embroidery department. So let's imagine you've got 6 heads on an embroidery machine. They all work together. And so when you switch the machine on, they start. When you stop and take all the garments off and put all the new garments on, I used to sort of say to people that that's like a pit stop. You know, it's like a Ferrari pit stop, because the machines are now down. So the quicker we can get everything loaded back up and press the start button, that will make an enormous difference. If the average running time on that machine is only 5 minutes, then that is the average running time for an embroidery machine. It runs for 5 minutes and then stops while it gets reloaded again, and then runs for 5 minutes again. So you imagine how many, that's a potentially 12 stops an hour 12 pit stops. So getting those pit stops really efficient. Look at Formula One now, pit stops compared to what they used to be like. They used to stop for 30 seconds. They can now do it in 2 seconds. And that's something to consider. I'm going to move on because I can see we're running tight on time. So going into training and personal development. I don't know if you want to kick off for this, Mark, just in terms of what your thoughts are on this element. I mean, I think this is major in terms of profitability of businesses, but it's very often overlooked, isn't it?
It is, and it's an area I'm really passionate about because I think people are the most important element of any business, and they're normally one of your largest costs. So I think training and developing your staff to think about how they're working, engaging them in the profitability of the business is a really important part of you being successful. So not a lot of people relate training to profitability. But to me, that's crazy because actually, when you start to look at some of the other areas we've discussed, like conversion rates and everything else, well, conversion rates depend on people doing things really well, how they engage with customers, how they talk to customers, how happy they are in the workplace will affect your conversion rates. If your conversion rates are high because your team are really good, well, your profitability is going to follow. And the other thing I'm really passionate about is, how you invest in those individuals and yourself, and you get people engaged in the profitability of your business. Really good organizations now reward people on profitability, and I'm a great believer in that. I think every business should be rewarding staff on profitability and sharing in the spoils of the success of the business, because that is the best way that you'll get motivated staff, you'll get engaged staff, and you'll get great staff retention, is by not being greedy and investing in your people. And I think that develops you as a leader as well, and develops the organization. So one thing to really link to your profitability is how you're looking after your people.
And what about this investing in yourself? I mean, I heard a story about someone who actually, and I think this is a great idea. I don't do this myself, but I'm just throwing it out there. Invest in yourself. So, I mean, and actually measure. I mean, people on here today are effectively investing in themselves. It's a time investment. There's no money involved, but time is as big a factor to people running businesses as money itself. So, invest in yourself and how much are you spending. So, there's one guy, I think he measured it, he spent £400,000 on himself over the course of a number of years. But he was physically thinking about that. How much am I investing in myself? Because obviously, if you're not investing in yourself, then you've only ever got the set of tools at your disposal that you're stood with. And so if you choose not to do much else, then those tools are the only ones you've got, aren't they?
No, exactly. I mean, I think continuous development for everybody of any age, any experience is just part of what should be everybody's everyday life. Makes you a far more rounded individual and a leader. None of us know everything. In a lot of the work I do, I'm not going in and finding anything that nobody else could find. I'm just unpicking what's going on in an organization and finding the potential. The answers are already in the organization. You've just got to flush them out and have the tools to be able to do that. And being a great leader is about continuously developing yourself, because you have a responsibility to then go and develop your people. But if you're not developing yourself, how can you develop your people? Yeah. So that investment is really imperative. I mean, I through the last 4 years of owning a business that I sold for a significant number, I had a very good business coach who stood by me through thick and thin, and that was a huge investment. I was spending 6 figures a year on my own development and the development of my senior team with coaching and training and everything else. So you've got to put your money where your mouth is.
I think irrespective of where you sit in business, having a mentor, a coach, whatever you want to call it, I think it's essential to be able to get unbiased assessment of your performance, your vision, stuff like that. Just to hear it as it is, because very often you don't get that from staff and employees, because they may not, maybe scared to tell you what they think actually.
No, absolutely. Your network will make or break you in business. That's why last week when we're talking about sales, I flagged up the keep negative people away from you. That's the killer of all organizations. But the reverse of that is good, positive people around you, people who can give you solid, unbiased advice is really, really important. And should be an ongoing thing.
Okay, well, pretty much at the end, we're coming at 11:57. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to shout them out. Unmute yourself, shout them out. Just a couple of things we've got going on. So on Thursday, we've got a LinkedIn profile webinar I'm doing on Thursday at 2 o'clock. Anybody who wants to improve their LinkedIn account, there's an hour going through LinkedIn. Really valuable. How many inquiries did you get off a minor change to your profile, Mark, last week?
I got about 6 new business clients out of that last week.
Yeah, no, just on one word change, wasn't it? Do you remember? We just changed one word, didn't we?
Yeah.
Guys, if you want to, it's part and parcel. If you're using LinkedIn to do your business, you've got to make sure your profile's right. So I'm doing that. It's free. It's 2 o'clock on Thursday. I have run this before. So those of you who've been on, I know some of you have, don't come on again, because I just can't be investing any more time in trying to find that new stuff about LinkedIn. Although there are some little new bits, but Dan, that's it. You follow me, great, and I appreciate it. But I can't be under pressure to find more stuff that I don't know about on LinkedIn profiles. Although, I
might just come on then to put you under pressure.
Exactly. Then I'm doing one on, this is next Tuesday, 11 o'clock. It's the same slot. This is CRMs Made Simple. And I'm going to do it on basically a system that I know quite well. I'm not an expert on it, but I do understand how to get the maximum out of it in terms of business performance, which is CRMs Made Simple. It's a CRM system that I use here, and it's called Capsule CRM. Some of you might know about it, but I'm going to do, I don't know how long that will last. Don't expect an hour. I might just knock it out in 30 minutes, this one. But it will be 30 minutes of good stuff, showing what to do with an inquiry, how to get it into a pipeline, how to evaluate it, how to keep vision of it. So right now in our office, when we were in our office, we used to have a whiteboard. So everything went on the whiteboard. It went in the CRM as well, yeah, but it went on a whiteboard. But we haven't got a whiteboard anymore. Okay, so people can't see the whiteboard. A lot of us are visual learners. We work on stuff visually. And so when you stick something in the computer, be very careful it's disappeared. Yeah, it might be the best system ever, blah, 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 but it's gone out of sight. Out of sight, out of mind. That's a fact. So what you have to do is understand how these computer systems can help you. I'm going to show you this system that's unbelievably good at keeping your opportunities front of mind. And that's next Tuesday. Anybody got any other questions on anything here they want to throw at myself or Mark that you heard that you thought, well, what's all that about? Didn't really understand that. Or do you think we talked a load of baloney? I don't know.
No, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, good stuff.
Okay.
Well, nice to see you folks on here again. Really appreciate it. I'm sure Mark and I will do another one. So if anyone's got any ideas on anything you want us to talk about, maybe a greater length, because we are overviewing that. We're not overviewing that for any reason other than giving you an end-to-end picture of some of this stuff. But quite happy to go into more detail on any of those subjects. Mark and I believe that we're willing to share anything we know for free. Not a problem. So if anything you want to know about sales, marketing, costs, purchases, agreements, anything like that, please just chuck it at me and Mark. Send me an email, and we'll see if we can incorporate it in any future webinars that we do.